Hey, Gaijin Geigers, welcome to the middle of the 7 theses. I'm glad you can make it. Um, I'm really grateful to the new subscribers and the people who are showing an interest, not just in the manga side, but also some of the cultural side of well, the monster cultural side of this channel. Um, let's get into it, shall we? So the monster dwells at the gate of difference. Okay, that's the fourth thesis. And this is about, we were talking about categories and borders there. And now we're expanding that a little more to talk about what that border might mean. And what it is talking about is the difference between us, the normals, and the scary others. So Cohen says the monster is an incorporation of the outside, the beyond, of all those loci that are rhetorically placed as distant and distinct, but actually originate within. So all our talk of the others, we define that based on what we think we are. So you can't really have others until you define what you are, and vice versa. You can't really define what you are until you define what is your scary other. So any kind of difference, alterity, can be inscribed across or constructed through the monstrous body. But for the most part, monstrous difference tends to be, still quoting Cohen, cultural, political, racial, economic, sexual. Uh, One example of this is the woman who oversteps the boundaries of her gender role risks becoming a Scylla or Scylla from Greek myth, right? A weird sister, Lilith, uh, or a Gorgon, the feminine, the monstrous feminine. As soon as you step without, well, let's look at the slide here that I have, and this will explain it uh, a little more. But just to get to some more points that I have here written in Japanese is that by otherizing, monsterizing, by monsterizing the other, it makes it easier to take away their rights. And taking away their rights becomes normalized, and it becomes it's shown as justice, basically. And what happens is that things outside the borders of what we consider is our polite society or whatever, they threaten the existence of, they actually do threaten a society as it is, uh, but not in the way people think. Like it threatens society as it is, in it puts pressure on society to grow, to evolve, and to accept a wider diversity. That's, I think we see what happens when people feel like diversity is forced on them. They completely freak out and they go to extreme measures and support extreme ideologies. So this is also Cohen, and this is the part I find very interesting. To complicate this category confusion further, one kind of alterity, difference, is often written as another, so that national difference, for example, is transformed into sexual difference. And this is because polysemy, in other words, a large number of meanings, is granted so that a greater threat can be encoded. Multiplicity of meanings. So, like, for example, Dracula is this foreign threat. He's this he's foreign, but he's also a sexual, very sexual being. So it's the double threat of an outsider, but also the outsider, heaven forbid, mating with our women. Oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? So it's this kind of confusion of different threats into one being uh, often makes it easier to otherize, to monsterize. If you can see how uh, that, like many uh, people of different races, different colors are depicted, you can see there's more than one threat written on their bodies, just by the mere being the color or race that they are. Already these meanings are being thrust kind of upon them, and that's a similar thing that's happening with monsterization, otherization. So the charts that I have here, the one on the left here is I have the person on the side of the gate. Here's the tori, the Japanese Shinto gate. He's on the side of the normal and the society, but his fears and what he feels uh, is a threat that he's created inside himself. He thrusts toward the outside, to the other side of the gate, but he actually cannot sever this connection. It's this connection cannot be broken. And I've drawn this gate as the devil's gate, Kimon, which is like once you cross it, you're in the Badlands, you're in dangerous territory. Uh, so in order to break through into the unknown territory, often there is a guard, like a monstrous guard. And you have to, and sometimes it's about facing your fears. And so you see this in a lot of stories, is that people face their fears in order to break through their bounds, to break through what's holding them back. Um, and so by facing their fears, by facing the monster, they become a much more whole creature. And this ties into a lot of interesting things, like what Jacques Lacan posits as the three layers of so-called reality. But he talks about the real is this thing that's floating underneath that we can never understand, we can never see, but sometimes when we experience trauma, it pokes through. And I think facing your fears and facing your deepest, darkest fears is kind of links to that in some ways, and that fascinates me. But I mean, there's so much that you can take from this. The fact that the things that you hate the most, the things that you fear the most, I mean, that fear is not an external thing, it's an internal thing. You created that fear. It's from yourself. So you're linked to you could easily say that Harry Potter and Voldemort, their link is unbreakable, for in story, but also just from a cultural theory point of view. All right, now let's look at the right side, and this is a fascinating thing. So this is where I'm talking back on the female being put into this very rigid box, this the boundary, and so that society has created for her this role that she's created to fill uh, as romantic partner, as mother, as wife, as housewife, etc. And what happens is when a woman breaks out, see, here's the loosening of the bear. The act of her leaving this boundary weakens the boundary itself. I mean, basically, it's challenging authority and challenging society, saying maybe this border is more arbitrary than you think, not a natural thing, but something that people have made. Um, and so this gets into some research by Baba Akiko, who did a lot of research into Oni. And one of the things that she focused on was the Yamamba, the Yamamba, which is a yokai. It's like a mountain uh old lady Oni kind of creature, right? When I first came to Japan, they the Gyaru movement was just getting started and came on in full force. And the makeup of the Gyaru makeup, there was many different styles, but there was one called the Yamamba makeup, which was like the reverse panda, the really dark skin, the light makeup around the eyes and etc. And yeah, that was a very interesting thing that happened. You don't see that much anymore. Living in the country, you still see more gyaru than you do uh, like in other parts of this nation, perhaps. So anyway, so you have the older lady who is self-sufficient. She's out in the mountains. She's able to make her own food. She doesn't need society. Society doesn't need her, but wants her to want to be part of society, right? And so her living out in the woods, being able to take care of herself, and not providing any value to society, like she's not a mother, uh, or she's not, a wife, she's not a sexual, target, or, something that can fulfill some other need that society has. So she's a threat. She's a threat to normality. And so it's just like the whole witch thing, the witch in the woods, it's this old witch lady, this old devil lady. And just her pure existence itself is a threat when she's actually not doing anything threatening. It's And so we've got story after story of people normalizing the attack on these women and picturing them as monsters. If you go back and look at all the female monsters from this kind of point of view, you can start to see some other forces at work. And that's what's fascinating about monster theory. So now, when the hero or you cross the gate and you cross out of your your boundaries and into another world, uh not only are you stepping into a new unknown world, which might be scary, but you also start to understand the monster a little bit more. You understand the different, you understand the other a little bit more. And I think that's what makes you more powerful. The reason that I chose the name Gaijin Gai for this channel in the first place is talking about being not so much foreigner, but outsider. Outsider is the Gaijin part, and the Jingai is the inhuman part. And so I link those together. It looks like I'm just making a fun little pun, but I'm actually, there's a little bit more method to my madness. And because I've always felt that my particular perspective has benefited from being able to step outside and look in. And also, being the other has given me more freedom. And this is something that I've seen in other research. There was a recent book on I think it's called Women and Other Monsters, a very fascinating book. But in that book, the author is talking about embracing the monsterness actually gives you more freedom and more power. And that's something that I also came across in my recent research on mermaids. So but kind of some other points, and this is some stuff from some other sources, is that monstrosity and the fear of monstrosity. This is a historically conditioned thing. It's not some kind of psychological universal. It's not this natural thing where we must abhor the monster. There are systems in place that create monsters that turn the little old lady who's out in the mountains, self-sufficient, can feed herself, doesn't offer anything to society, but doesn't bother society. But there are systems in place, when you look at witch hunts, the actual literal witch hunts, there were manuals in place to this is how you hunt a witch, this is how you determine if it's a witch, and this is how you destroy a witch. And almost all the steps will end up in, the person who's being accused basically doesn't have any way to survive such accusations, intact. So, there's our systems in place. And, and what I like to see, or what I saw in the comics that I chose to talk about, what kind of tied this to me is that I saw those systems also at work inside the comics. And I don't know how much of that was planned by the creators of Kimetsu no Yaiba, Demon Slayer, and The Promised Neverland. I don't know how much of that was planned, but there's all kinds of things that kind of tied that idea together for me. So I can't wait to get into that stuff, but you still have to bear with me for 3 more theses, and then we'll be done. And then we can jump right into, then we have to talk about Oni. We'll talk about Oni, okay? And then we'll talk about other Oni comics. And then we'll talk about, the other Oni comics, that part is going to be fascinating too, because especially if you like Nagai Go, you're going to be excited about that. So anyway, bear with me. I appreciate those who have stuck with it so far. Of course, I've just been watching the numbers, and of course they're getting smaller as we go along. And I totally understand. This is theory, and it's we want to talk about comics and 4-paneled goodness and this kind of thing. So, and we will. I promise we'll get there. But I really do appreciate anyone who has kind of sat through each thesis, and I would love to hear your thoughts, rebuttals, anything. So have a good evening, and I will see you in the funny papers.